So welcome to a very special episode of Activate, Pivot,
Charge!
I'm Jerome from House Baratheon, your usual host.
I'm JC from House Starks.
I'm Fred from House Lannister.
And I'm special guest Adam from House Targaryen.
Cool, so we got a special guest, as he have said. Adam, can you introduce yourself? How long have you been playing? Why are you using Targaryen? And what are you doing in general in the community?
Yeah, so my name's Adam, as I said, Kynathian on Discords. I'm sure you've seen me poking around. I've been playing for probably since before the pandemic at this point, so it's been a while. I think I came in right when Season 2 started. I started with Night's Watch, moved my way through to Free Folk, and then I said, you know what, Cavalry are really cool. And ever since I've been playing the Targaryens. At this point, I played them at Nationals. I've been playing them at pretty much every tournament. They're just a very fun, very aggressive faction that rewards a lot of good positioning.
That's good. So we don't have a lot of Targaryen players around over here in Quebec too. So that's good. Good to hear that. We'll probably have a bit of discussions later on for Targaryen. Okay, so we have a special episode, as mentioned in the introduction, because we're going to do this episode with minimal editing. We are going to go through the survey that was shared with the rest of the community in regards to ASOIAF Nexus. We want to give a bit of introduction and context into this episode too. So as a starting point for people that weren't aware, beginning of January, Carlo, which is the main developer and the one that was hosting ASOIAF Stat, decided to unplug basically ASOIAF Stat. He gave a timeline up to the invitationals, which are taking place at the end of March. After March, he said he would bring down this website. So of course, as expected, this created a lot of stress and anxiety in the community because this is our main hub to basically enter tournaments, gather data, know what's going on with the scene in general. It's a good community tool too. So considering that created a void, Activate, Pivot, Charge over here. So our group decided to take the reins and evaluate what the community was looking for a product that would basically replace or let's say continue the legacy of ASOIAF Stat. So today what we're going to do is going to go through the survey. I think it's important also to mention that the reason why the first thing that was shared was not a product or a vision, but more so a survey, is because we want to make sure that what we are suggesting as a upcoming website or center for tournament gathering, content creation, reflects exactly what the community wants. So this is why we're going through the survey rapidly. We'll give you broad strokes. We may talk a bit more into details for some questions. And this survey will become available and will be the basis for the development of future features and our roadmap, which will be shared very shortly.
I mean, I know I started playing. It was step 1, download War Council. Step 2, create a account on Stats. So you guys have big shoes to fill, and it sounds like you guys are on the right start from everything I've seen so far.
Thank you. On our side, what's important and the reason why we're doing both the survey and putting it public too, we think that this should be public in general. We believe in open source. We believe that the best way to build a community is to share stuff with the community. So this is one of the main ideas behind ASOIAF Nexus. It will be open source. We will build it as a scalable product and we'll make sure that it's built by the community for the community. So more details will come as we move forward, but for right now, I think it's going to be important to go through the broad strokes of the survey we've gone through. We can start with some initial statistics. We've had a lot of response to the point where I didn't expect Microsoft forums to basically tell me you've got your limit. So I didn't know there was a limit at that point, but received over 100 response within 16 hours, and within 72 hours, I got 300 response, which was really, really interesting. It gives a lot of details. And of course, as we're going to go through these broad strokes of this survey, I think it's important to understand that even though we've got 300 response, there's, I would tend to say, if we take a look at social media, about probably closer to like 12,000 to 14,000 players worldwide. Some of them are more casual, some of them don't play anymore. If we take a look at ASOIAF Stat, where people will enter their lists on tournaments, so maybe a more competitive aspect, we have close to 8,000. Right now we have 300 responses. So of course, these are the people that are most active in the community, and it will show with the data that we will go through, but we think it's still very representative of what people will want from this website.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the first couple of responses, what was it? A third of the people were either tournament organizers or local game store owners or some form of content creator that wanted to voice their own opinion on this.
There's a lot of people involved in the game in general, and I was also quite surprised that 1/3 of responses were tournament organizers. So
I think once you're starting to get onto stats, I mean, like everybody just like they want to be part of this community. They want to be adding their own flair to what's going on.
And I also think that it's very important to have the people that are very engaged within the community to speak first, because those people typically are the early adopters that you want, because they transform into ambassadors for the platform afterwards, and giving them the chance to contribute directly, there's more chances that they feel a sense of belonging to the platform, that it really responds to their needs. So it helps the adoption in general afterwards, when the people that we look up to or that are very active in the community speak up for it.
It's a good point. I think we can go really rapidly on the broad strokes for the first couple of questions. So the first couple of questions, the idea was to identify who are we talking to. There's the question of roles, which we were surprised of seeing how many people are tournament organizer or active members, let's say, of the community, more so than just players. So that was quite surprising, a third of the responders. What was quite surprising for me too, which was the first question, was how long have you been playing ASOIAF Miniatures? I think this is some data that may be not ignored but discarded. Something very important which we see is that a lot of people, 100 of the people that answered, so about close to 1/3, it's about 3 years, and we'd have 50 that's 2 years. What that indicates for me, knowing that the community grows, knowing that every social media, be it Facebook, Reddit, the Discords, they tend to have more and more people as time goes on. The churn rate is really low. So that means that people that enter the game don't tend to go away real fast. If that was the case, if churn rate was really high, we'd see a big bar on a couple of months or 6 months ago. So
I mean, but you can still say like a lot of, what was it, like 15, 16, whatever percent of the people have only been playing for less than a year, which shows the game is still growing.
Yep.
Which is awesome. I'm always super glad to see even just little smatterings of that type of statistic.
Growing and also keeping the player base relatively happy too. So both of those things are showing that the game is healthy and going in the right direction. Of course, we need the tools to make sure that the community stays focused, but I think that was something that was really interesting to give a bit of, hope in where we're going with this game, of course. Rapidly, also in terms of identification, very important to see that a lot of people, most of the people that answered would be closer to like 70% do consider themselves as being more competitive. They'll play every occasion they can get. They'll go to national or aspire to go to nationals. So this is quite expected with like the most active members that will be the most active players. Something that I was quite surprised with, which again showcases the point where the community is so important, is physical play is very, very high. People really want to play physically. It was it 36% of the people that responded said they don't play online, which there's more percentage of people that say that play on a very regular basis than people that play online. So that's very interesting too. Kind of jealous. We were talking about that before the show, that we're kind of jealous that there are some regions in the world where they'll have some weekly tournaments or weekly plays, which is not the case everywhere. But I think this shows a lot of interest also. So again, I think having a tool that centralizes and gives information, especially on where tournaments are, is something that has a lot of value, which we have seen very, very rapidly and very clearly, that people want to be able to identify where they can play because they like to play online. Offline, so in person.
And you'll have like a lot of small communities like our game store, or maybe like 12, 15 regular players. So you want to enable and have tools for all these small communities, and that can eventually like join together and organize a big tournament in your region. So like, oh yeah, we are a few hours away. There's another game store that plays. So you want to be able to put all these people together and have a common tool for everyone.
Yeah, the social aspect is very important, and sharing the passion, the joy of playing. Of course, online has all these advantages, but playing physically with other people, it has kind of a feeling that you cannot easily replicate.
I mean, if you guys want a story, at the U.S. Nationals this year, we went with a guy who is actually from Virginia. So I'm from New Jersey. Virginia, it's a couple hours away. He came all the way to Nationals with the group. We're all hanging out. I'm talking to some guys from California, and they go, "Oh, you know Matt too?" I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah." They go, "Yeah, he showed up to some of our tournaments." There are people who they find stuff on stats and they just go to these tournaments. So it's super important to have like an engaged platform that shares all this stuff.
And especially when you have some active communities, that's good that you can like pollinate and go to different regions. But what I've seen, and I've been contacted directly with some members in the Philippines and in China also, some of them, the communities are a bit smaller. So what they'll want to know is like people playing around, like in terms of like radius of cities. They'll have the density of population that's much higher, but they won't know like close to me where the people play. So this aspect of like identifying where to play and enabling people to create this kind of like social community together is something that I think is really important and showcases this reason why everybody's playing too, to create links with people and bonds. So if we go to basically what was the main features, the most important features according to people in terms of ASOIAF Stat, because I think that was an important question, because for me, you'd ask me up front, what's the most important aspect? I'm a data guy, I've done a survey and I have all those responses. I've done some math over that. Not a surprise.
Never would have guessed.
But of course, yeah, having access to the data, doing some analytics, analyzing results and everything would be one of the things I'd put on top. What was interesting is to see that, now considering a bit more what happened with ASOIAF Stat and what's going on, of course, tournament organizing is the most important aspect. And I think there's a couple of important information we got from tournament organizing, which we could maybe spend a bit more time on. Of course, ASOIAF Stat and Carlo, we need to thank him, and I think it'll never be said enough and needs to be repeated again. Carlo has enabled the community of ASOIAF Stat to converge towards a same type of standardization of play. If you take a look at the rule book from ASOIAF, there's a couple of different ways to play. You can like bring three lists with 3 different commanders. You can have the 30, 40, 50 points. They basically give you like a toolbox to play around and do whatever you want. Having like a centralized way to bring tournaments together and create a meta, and that everybody is standardized towards the same type of play on a website did help us, the community to drive within the same way of working together. So I think that's one thing that must be mentioned that is really important. This being said, this was one of the features that were requested, is to give a bit more flexibility in terms of different types of play. Maybe Adam, you can go a bit more into details, because I know you guys have experimented with a couple of different types of play, which has been mentioned by Simon also, right?
Yeah, one of the things that we wanted to do, kind of to spice up, towards the end of a lot of metas, it can kind of feel like you're fighting the same 5 units in each army. So what we tried to do was we did a 40+4 tournament, which is actually in the tournament guidelines. It's one of the alternate list building things where you have a cache of like 4 points to use specifically for attachments. And we felt that was a really cool refresh. I saw some, stuff that I've never just seen before, because you never have the points to do it. But there wasn't a good way to do that online, so we actually had to go through and make like a paper roster, and everybody had to physically share their lists. And, I missed stats at that point, because we really wish we could have put it on there. It would have made things go a lot smoother.
Yeah, that's one feature that came a couple of times to be able to do like alternate list buildings, which of course I think there's a lot of value in centralizing, but not giving the opportunity for other type of list building, and also I think being able to segregate those statistics to be it will kind of contaminate some data if you bring everything together, which is kind of the case right now. But being able to do that is something that was mentioned in terms of tournament and data collection.
Yeah, I saw that came up a couple times in the data, and it's fun because I'd say most of the game's balanced around the 40-point meta, but it is interesting to try out the different things, and it's nice to do that. Put it on a website, have different statistics for that one specific niche. If you really like 30-point armies because it goes quicker or whatever, it's nice to be able to filter down and say what's good in that, or what create a tournament bracket or something just for that.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Have you guys seen anything else in terms of what was interesting in terms of tournament building?
It's a bit different, but one of the things I was surprised is about the question, did you have issues within tournaments with ASOIAF Stats? And I think it was half of people said yes.
53%,
Personally, I'm not sure where this comes from, but it might be... the only example I have in my mind was the affiliation. For instance, if you would say, okay, so we're a group from the same local store and we want to play different people while at that big tournament, so you could just write down the name of your team, and basically the system would not put you against your teammates.
Round one.
Yeah, round one, of course. We kind of wonder if it works for real, because it happened repeatedly that we were facing a teammate round one while specifically doing this. So is this what people are talking about when talking about the issues? We unfortunately didn't ask what it was for people, but still it's surprising to me, and it shows room for improvement, which is nice in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak from my own experience of doing the tournament organizing that there were multiple times when I'd have to manually edit a game after it was finished because somebody couldn't report or somebody double confirmed and it showed up twice in the game their statistics. So I mean, that is what it is when it's a program that's made so organically in that sense. You're gonna find these types of bugs.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Like Carlo said, it was a COVID project, so he built this up from nothing, and he achieved something pretty good. We all used it extensively for everything, and it's I think he did a great job with what a guy can do alone with a little support. So I think we have to remember he did a good job, but also when something gets used by a whole community, the little cracks will start to show up, and if you want to make sure you patch this up and you solidify everything, then you need some resources, and you have to know where you're going, and to know have resources. It's a complex endeavor to maintain and build something that you solve all the issues that come up when it's extensively used, and it's the tool that people rely on.
The strength of a community. Open source.
There you go. Talking about the tournament stuff, I think rapidly also some broad strokes I found, which was interesting. I asked a couple of questions up front in terms of list building, because of course list building is embedded within ASOIAF Stat, because getting statistics and everything. Initially, a couple of questions I've asked was to basically just evaluate is list building a feature that's necessary in terms of player experience. Do they want to have that? If they could upload a list from another website that would be just a dedicated list builder and upload that through a ASOIAF Nexus, would that be okay? I was surprised to see how people or want this list building feature in general. So it does go hand in hand. Not only do we see a almost third separation in between, do you prefer ASOIAF Stat list building, War Council, or you like both, which is, a division there. There's going to be more questions into exactly what's the best type of list building. We've got some response that were interesting, but I think there's much more information there than I thought. Also, quite surprised by the fact that if I talk about my own experience, of course, it taints all the questions I asked. But I was wondering if people were like me, which is when they're playing in a tournament against somebody, I find it easier for me to like enter that list basically on War Council and take a look at it. Just because it's mobile, it's a bit more easier to use. The UI is a bit more intuitive. I'm quite surprised how many people use the list builder from ASOIAF Stat during play. So
I'm one of those guys.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of those guys from what I see.
From what I understand is like having one unified tool that you can use, like one hub for list building tournament, submitting to the tournament, and then during the tournament is like what people want. If you have like to use 3 apps or websites, it's more complex and you have to double the work. So if people want it simple, which is relatable.
And I'm lazy.
It goes back to one of the most important feature that was mentioned through, what are some features you'd like to see in the list builder? I think it answers exactly what I just described, which is like intuitive UI, easy to use on a mobile app. That was number one, easy to use on a mobile app. It needs to be easy to use and more intuitive. Makes sense. We need to go to this level. So that will be something that will need to be implemented. Second point was, taking a look at what ASOIAF Stat had maybe things to improve on, and there was a lot of focus there, which does have a bit of value, but we want to build, of course, something that's a bit that represents what people want, the ability to modify existing lists, visibility on restricted option, more organizing and filters. So we see a lot of quality of life things that people want to include in general for list building. So,
I mean, one of the cooler stats that I saw from your thing was about list sharing. I think almost half of people thought it was extremely important, and the vast majority thought it was at least somewhat important. That's the type of stuff. It sounds like it's a community building situation in that point where you want to be able to show off your cool creations and what's been winning, what you found to be working, what didn't work, all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't 50%. It was 50% that said extremely important, and like almost 40% that said somewhat important. Like people that said
it was
not important really is like
percent.
3%. So, because I'm thinking about it, like, what's the best way right now as we speak to share lists? It's to screenshot your cell phone, basically, or screenshot like. So, like, that's one of the best way if you're on mobile to do it. It's not as easy to share lists right now. So.
And you can copy the link in stats currently and send that out. It's not like it's impossible. You do it all the time. I do it with my friends, especially when I'm like, hey, what did you play yesterday? So I can put it into our battle report. But it would be nice to have some form of more condensed sharing, which, that's one of those things where now you have to brainstorm. Is that worth the squeeze of trying to figure out how to get that to look nice? Do people like this versus that? All those things, which is the hard work of being a web developer.
Yeah, exactly. Something we found really interesting also, and initially I was surprised by the response, and then I just, like I said also in the Discord, it's not that surprising, considering that gamers like gamification. So it turns out that the achievements, badge, trophies, not only do people like it, they understand why people like it. People that said, doesn't really change anything to me, they always added the caveat, but I understand why people like it. Just a question of, would you play non-meta lists if there were achievements tied to it? I had a lot of people that were saying, yes, I would actively do that. Which I think for the health of the game, if you're trying, we're using a tool to build community, to bring a bit more diversity, to make sure that people have fun with the game. If you want to have fun, converging towards the most meta list is some fun for some people, but not others. Allowing a lot of different people having fun in different ways, using different commanders, trying to find the best way to play something that's considered bad. I think that is something that a lot of people see value in by giving badges and trophies. Because let's just remind ourselves, the badge aspect that was implemented at ASOIAF Stat that people like a lot, asked you to win a game with every commander. And I don't think I need to go through all of the different factions, and most of the people know it's not all commanders that are born equal. even in season 5. A lot of them are pretty terrible. But people like to grind that. So that means that there's an aspect of gamification or gratification of achieving something. This, of course, I see that as really important, and I see a lot of more efforts being put into that. In terms of feature development, would not be in the MVP, as we want to make sure we have a tournament organizing tool and a list builder before anything else. But this would be implemented pretty rapidly to make sure that we have some kind of achievements, and maybe even tied to some events and tied to some time. And as other factions come out also, we'll be able to add those badges. So I think that's something that people will be really interested in from what I see.
People want an incentive to play like Balon Greyjoy Commander or Jaime Lannister.
Yeah, exactly.
And people just like to show off. I know a lot of people just love being like, yeah, look, I got my Bolton's badge with the neutrals. And, honestly, I feel like the first half of that is even harder than the neutral half, but that's a whole nother story. But it's just it's fun to do. It's a fun little flex, it's something to grind out with your friends. How many times have I heard in the different Discords, ooh, I'm trying to go for my Targaryen badge or my Martell badge, does anybody have a good list for this? And it helps spur the conversation even, just talking about how you can use the quote unquote worst commanders differently maybe.
I'm kind of throwing a curveball here, but talking about the grind and the challenge, self-inflicted challenge sometimes. I'm just wondering with, let's say, the hypothetical scenario that all the ELO or badge data would be lost between the process of switching platform at some point. How would people respond? I know, of course, people would like it to stay and have what they already had, but in a sense I feel like it's also fun to have kind of a great reset where you're like, okay, I can prove once again that this ELO that I had, I'm still worth my level of play. I can still win those games. I can do it again maybe and win those badges with new commanders and the new regulations, because some people maybe got their badge on season 3 and then it's now the meta is completely different. So it's kind of a new journey that could be interesting, even if at face value it seems like, oh, it's sad that I lost these things, but it's an opportunity to build back better. So I'd be curious about the reaction of people about this. Of course, it's not going to be the same for everyone, but everything has its own opportunity.
On our side for Nexus, we haven't taken a position yet because it's not clear 100% exactly those data. The position exactly where Carlo is. He has shared during the Q&A that the data will be complicated and difficult to deal with because they're kind of segregated in 2 different servers. This being said, I think before taking any position, we need to evaluate the effort of going through the data and also the willingness of people. How are people eager to keep up data? If the eagerness is very, very high, we'll need to work something out. Well, we want to answer what the community wants. If people say, you know what, like GC said, I'm ready for a great reset anyways, I'm a good player, I'll continue being good anyways. Well, in that case...
That is a good point. ELO, I'm sure for the people who don't know, it's based on your rankings in chess and how likely you are to beat other people. That's where it originates from. And I'm sure there's somebody who's going to tell me how I'm wrong. And, I'm sure I don't have the whole picture on that. But your ELO represents how good you are as a person and also how much you've grown since you started playing. Your ELO will increase as you get better. If you do a quote-unquote reset, people will just naturally fall back to their same ELOs. It's not like, oh man, I was 1,800 before we went on to stats and now I'm 1,600. It's like, well, you'll get back to 1,800. You just got to keep on chugging and keep playing your games.
Or playing games against people that are higher and higher level because...
Exactly.
I think it's a good point. People will maybe intuitively, which is something I also thought, 2 weeks ago, because I had to search on that to make sure I understand correctly that. But I did have the impression, and it's maybe the case for other people, that it's kind of like a level up. You level up when you win some games, so you get more points. kind of like almost like a video game, but it's not like that at all. It's more like this is what the system thinks is your skill level, and we need to readjust if you win or you lose. So if you play like a couple of games against people that are higher and higher level and you win, the system will, the Elo system will say, well, okay, this is what I think is your true skill level now. So it's not, you don't need to really grind those games to get to the point where it's supposed to represent your true Elo. You just need to play a couple of games and win to a certain, percentage of time so that it can identify, okay, this is the skill level. Good, maybe we can go on towards the 2-3 questions that were asked also on the freemium aspect, freemium or monetization in general. I think, Adam, you wanted to maybe start the discussion with a point you wanted to address.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's one of the things that everybody thinks, how are we gonna have that implemented? That sounds like it's gonna take a lot. You're talking about developers and stuff. I mean, like, you asked the question, how would you evaluate revenue streams to keep the tool maintained? And for the most part, people were relatively positively receptive to the idea that there might have to be some cost to that. And I know that everybody pro clutches, ooh, money. No, but that, unfortunately, that's how you do stuff in the world today. I'm looking at it. It seems like most people seem to be okay with most ways that you'd want to try to generate some way to keep this site going.
Exactly, and it's always like a push or pull. So, of course, we've gone through a process by which we had somebody that gave his time, as freely to develop a site on his own and just, was trying to reimburse his monthly payments through goodwill. This can work for some people, but if we want to build something that goes through time, I think we need to implement a couple of things. One of the first things I've realized through this journey of talking to a lot of people, developers, tournament organizers, top players, just regular members of the community, the importance of this site is very, very big for them. There's been a couple of people that wanted to throw in some cash to make sure this thing works. What I found that was really interesting is that opening the site to make sure that people contribute openly makes it so there's a lot of developers that they simply want to have their impact on the development. Make sure that they develop that together as a project. And that, for them, a lot of them, represents more than an hourly pay. I think this can work in terms of development, but I think also that they should be recognized to a certain extent, as a goodwill gesture of like, thank you for your time, would be necessary. So money would need to be involved at a certain point. But even if we're just talking about development, at a certain point, maintenance will be required. We'll be using some tools that, will help us store all that data. It's a lot of data, calling APIs and everything. And like it or not, open source or not, it might cost some money, some monthly upkeep, and we need to make sure that this is taken care of. So there's a couple of different revenue or monetization models that were suggested. A couple of them that I expected a bit more of a bad, reputation, like ads, was maybe something that's a bit more of the past. I understand that people don't want to go to a website and get like ads on stuff that is not really related to ASOIAF, so that makes sense.
Try going on those random Wikipedia pages for some of your favorite fandoms, and then you're bombarded with all those different ads.
It's so crazy. You're just trying to read, and you have like 3 videos starting at the same time, and you're like, oh, it's.
And I almost want to take a half a step back and say, I don't think I want to make it clear, and from my discussions with you, you're not trying to make money off this. You're not trying to do anything like that. You want to have the site run as good as it can, and the core features, you have no desire to make those paywalled or hard to get to or unaccessible. Anything you could do right now on stats sounds like something you still want to be able to do without any barrier.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, people can take my word for it. I will say it. It's not for money. And the reason why people can go over than just taking my word for it is that, to be honest, I mean, there's not a lot of money to be done anyways. There's no real money to be done. There's maintenance to be paid. There's, I think, a crowdfunding to make sure that we can develop this site and use extra resources if we realize that within the community we don't have I don't know, a data engineer or somebody that's really specialized in one specific tools, we can, pay him to make sure that we have a website that has quality and that can scale up. This is why money needs to be involved. But for me, the big thrill of this whole process is making sure we answer what the community wants, positioning ourselves as leaders of this community. And, I've discovered this game about 6 months ago with my friends over here. In Quebec, we've showed the game to like 7, 8, 9 people. And all of a sudden, when we came up to a tournament in Montreal, it became the biggest tournament in Canada. So I'm seeing the impact of like sharing a common passion. And this is what I see as the extension of that. Sharing the passion for ASOIAF and building a website together, open source with developers, making sure it works, more so than just the first year, and then we don't really know how to deal with, paying upkeep and everything. That's the real objective on that side. And, making sure that the community is heard is the most important fact. So,
well, our first reaction was like when Carlo announced that stats would be taken down is, wow, that's a big hit for the community. And I remember like soon after that, like the day after, Jerome, you came to see me and said like, do you think we can do something? Is it crazy? And I said like, well, maybe it's a little crazy, but we could try something. We've done like crazy stuff before. So it's just like we've all in Quebec City, our little community, we started playing recently, and our community built around on that, and we were really like enthusiastic about it. So we just want to keep that alive.
And more than keeping it alive, I think the game has so much potential and so much untapped potential, and the platform to host that game also has a huge potential. Unfortunately, I think the stats 1.0, because of how it was born and everything, maybe that potential is a bit capped. But if we were able to build something from the ground up, knowing where we want to go, and with the involvement of all the community, the sky's the limit. Like there is possibility to do something very, very interesting, scalable, that will grow the game, and you get that feedback effect from the platform being good, then the game, more people playing, and then more people playing, more people interested in contributing to the platform. We want to see it thrive, not just survive.
Yep. And I think, the freemium was one point I think that was interesting to evaluate, which is why, I think it's something a bit more interesting in terms of monetization model, because you can think of it as kind of like a voluntary donation with added benefits. So I see voluntary donation as being like the top, because it doesn't involve anything in particular. It's more so voluntary. Of course, when we're in voluntary donation, this can swing a lot. So this is, again, just thinking about the future of the platform. If we want to make sure that we're able to keep up the upkeep and make sure it survives through long term, through more and more data, more and more players, more and more features, and also develop as time goes on. The idea was to go through the premium, and what was interesting was to get like the feedback of people, not only like what people was ready to pay for, but what amount they were ready to pay for also. The fact that we have almost like 42% of players said they'd like more data. The basis, and I think that's very important to mention up front also, but everything that ASOIAF Stat provided free of charge must be free of charge and will be free of charge in ASOIAF Nexus. This is the basis of the platform we'll build. LO1 units, LO1 players, leaderboards, tournaments, this will all be available. What we're thinking is like, if we want to push this a bit further, if we want to add some extra stuff, stuff that won't necessarily discriminate between people that pay, so they have an extra edge, maybe more cosmetic, maybe some data that's not as relevant for meta, we'll see. This is something we'll continue moving on to see how we implement that. But then again, it's just to ensure that the platform survives long term. So that's the idea.
And people have a lot of really good ideas on which kind of features they would want. And so many times I'm like, oh, wow, I never thought of this, but I would love to see this. And there's just too many to discuss them right now. But people are so creative.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things that we could also add, which was quite surprising, again, when I shared the data with Adam, was the first thing he told me, wow, I didn't expect that. Can you go into details the question that surprised you, and why did it surprise you, Adam?
Yeah. I thought it was amazing how many people were hungering for some form of a user-submitted guide or tips or tricks. At the end of your questionnaire, it was like one of the last questions, and some 76% of people seem to really, really want some way to search other people's information, like try to figure out, well, what does this person who seems to be really good at Targaryens or Martells or whatever, why do they play this unit? What's going on with that? Like some form of guide or tip thing.
I think it also showcases that there's something we could add as ASOIAF Nexus, not only like continuing the legacy of Carlo and adding a couple of features. There's something right there. We see 76% of people want guides and tips. It should be a platform where content creators are also centralized there. You'll not only have information on tournaments and stats, but also on how does this faction work? What are some articles on maybe some specific lists? Maybe more tips on specific attachments. Here's how you use this attachment. Here's why it's good. And I don't know for you, Adam, but for us too, when we're doing some podcasts and we get some guests, some top players invited, and they talk and they're so passionate about it. Being able to have like an article written on that and reading that almost upgrades your playing game if you're competitive just reading through that. So I do see value there, and I think this is something that would bring the community together too, and also encourage, content creators that have maybe a bit less outreach to be able to be seen also. Being able to select, identify, this content creator goes in that direction, this one in this one, they're more casual, they're more competitive. So I think this is something that could be very interesting to implement and make sure it's, again, towards this community building aspect.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be one of the biggest areas for growth and, a differentiation on what makes Nexus its unique thing that it is. We'd been spitballing for now however long since the announcement came out that this was happening. Like, well, what could we do? Because I think within the day or two, you would message me like, hey, and the rest of Broken Banners, what do you think we could do? Do you think we could do something? And we were spitballing this type of stuff, I guess kind of almost circling back to the whole club affiliation thing. Would it be fun to have clubs? Would it be fun to have, would it be fun to have these situations where you can kind of collect people and resources and, like find the best Targaryen player. I keep saying Targaryen. That's just the faction I play.
Seem to have a little bias there, right?
Yeah. No, I would not be at the top. I'll say that much. Proud 50% win rate at nationals this year, and I'm cool with that. But going and seeing why does this person play an Outrider co instead of a Screamer co or whatever's going on. Find these little things, just picking people's brains. That makes me a better player for all the other games that I play.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like sometimes we have some discussions and we'll go like, the idea between attachment is that you want to add like extra points to your units. So your 6-point units, if you add one attachment that costs 1, it's almost like it's worth 8 points. And you're kind of trying to identify the game in another direction, and that helped us to a certain degree. But having a lot of people sharing their thoughts, sharing their way of seeing the game, especially if they perform well, I think it helps a lot of people like improving in general. Because, of course it feels bad if you lose all the time, but if you see that you're improving all the time too, and you have some tools to improve, and you're really passionate about it, and it's all available on the same website, I think that's a really good way to basically push the game forward.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a lot of community content like on a lot of platforms, on YouTube channels, on podcasts, on different Discords. But if you can like create a hub where all this thing gets aggregated, then it can be like really nice for the people to see like, okay, yeah, well, I want to be better with this faction. Like, who talks about it?
Yep, exactly. Which is why we call the name Nexus. So centralizing point for everything. So
very clever, very clever.
There you go. 15 minutes thought about it, and turns out well. Good. So I think that pretty much does it for the overall of the stats. There's a lot of interesting information. There's a couple of things we haven't gone through. 35 questions, of course. Spending a lot of time on that. We'd have probably like 2 hours of recording. If you guys that are listening would be interested in getting the data or sharing the data, just let us know. It will become available. We have no issues in sharing it. Of course, if you want to go a bit more into details. This will be the basis for the development of the roadmap for ASOIAF Nexus, so it won't come to no surprise. And as we move forward and we're developing and we're faced with some crossroads in terms of development, different options, different way of thinking, different way of development, other surveys will come through. And of course, people that are interested in giving more feedback, be it for beta testers or being more so like a, let's say, control group or a group that we can ask much more questions on, we'd be very interested in getting that because it helps us iterate and innovate and get the best product for the community, which is again the main idea behind that. If we build something with the community, open source, it needs to fulfill the needs for them. So, any parting words, last words you guys have?
I would like to hear a bit more about broken banners.
Oh, well, thank you for that great segue. So you can find me on the internet on the Broken Banners YouTube channel. We put out regular videos, just short form battle reports, where we just try to showcase a couple different commanders and have a little bit of fun with it. Nothing too serious, nothing too competitive, but hopefully it's an interesting watch.
Yeah, we've done a collaboration together. There's more to come also, so very interesting. And I think this is something to mention also, just personally, maybe a parting note on my part. Coming from a background of being a product manager, trying to think for a company what's the best product, how to deal with competition, how to beat competition. There's kind of a way of thinking that gets developed. And the surprise of me just, reaching out to other content creators and everybody wanting to work together. This community is really awesome. And I think it's really good to all work together towards the same goal. I find that inspiring. I find that really different from the day job I have. So I really appreciate being able to collaborate with you guys at Broken Banners. Same with others that are coming also. So I think pushing the community together, we all have the same objective, and we just need to focus on that. More content, more people that play, more fun.
Yeah, no, I definitely have appreciated it. It seems like everybody that I've talked to and I've seen you've talked to and it has been discussed, it seems everybody's very much, okay, how do we create something that's good for the community and helps make the community better than it is today and will be in the future? And I think that's really great. And I commend your efforts to keep everybody, moving forward in a progressive direction.
Good, thanks. And again, it was mentioned in the announcement. If you're interested in, participating in this whole big endeavor, the project, be it, I've got some people that contacted me for translation, be it for manual testing, be it for development. If you're one of those guys that want to throw in a bit also to be able to give that to the developers at certain particular milestones. Anything you want to do, that you want to help, contact me, and I'm really open to make sure that everybody gets their part of the development and the excitement of the product development. So good. So I guess this will be for the end of a very special episode of Activate, Pivot,
Charge!